Good morning. So this morning I just received a revelation, a deeper revelation of Romans 12 and 2, and also just the correlation between being able to discern God's will and the way and holding on to the ways of the world. So I've seen here that scripture clearly, and there's two verses that I'm going to look at, but it's clearly correlating God's will with letting go and releasing and turning away from the ways of the world, being able to discern what God would have for you to do. And we're always seeking, people are always, and I'm always like, what is God's will for me in this situation? What would God do? What do I do? Like wanting to know God's will and how related that is to the ways of the world, or being able to see the ways of the world, to know like, okay, I know God's not leading me down this path because, hey, I can discern this is a way of the world. So let's look at Romans 12 and 2. I love the Amplified version. It breaks it down so it's easier to understand. Romans 12 and 2, do not be conformed to this world, this age, fashioned after and adapted to its external superficial customs, but be transformed, changed by the entire renewal of your mind, by its new ideals and new attitudes, so that you may prove for yourself what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God, even the thing which is good and acceptable and perfect in His sight for you. So it talks about discerning what is good and acceptable and perfect in God's sight for me. And I can't help but look at this and think about mate selection, because if we need to know, like, we need to have released the ways of the world so we can see, okay, so we can discern, hey, Lord, is this person for me? Are you leading me down this path? It may not align perfectly with what the world says is acceptable and good and perfect, but Lord, is this your will for me? So we got to be able to discern the difference. In 1 John 2:15 through 17, it lays out what is the ways of the world, right? So I'm going to read that real quick. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love for the Father is not in them. For anything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. So 1 John 2 and 16, it's basically laying out what is of the world. So we don't have to guess, right? It says the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So what's the lust of that flesh? What are these things? So I'm going to go back to the Amplified version because it kind of lays it out. It says the lust of the flesh, which, the flesh, our desires, sensual gratification, pleasure. The flesh, I feel like the flesh is always saying, feed me now, I want this, the flesh is always wants gratification and pleasure. The lust of the eyes, the greedy longings of the mind, lusting after wrongly desiring something. The pride of life, pride in possessions, boastful pride of life. These are all things that the Amplified version are kind of laying out. Stability in earthly things, assurance in one's own resources. So these are all the things of the world. This is what 1 John is saying. These are the ways of the world. These things are not from God, right? So if I want to discern God's will, if I want to know what's good and acceptable and perfect will of God for me, I want to know what's good and acceptable and perfect in His sight for me, then I need to be able to look at these things and discern, hey, am I desiring this because of this? Have I renewed my mind? Do I have new ideals and a new attitude? Because we have not renewed our mind from the ways of the world. We're going to have, our ideas are going to be set, and that our attitudes are going to be set in those things. But it says, don't conform to the world. Then you'll know His. Then you'll be able to discern. Then you'll be able to recognize His will, to test and approve the good and perfect will of God. That requires discernment. Discernment of the Spirit, knowing what is of God and what isn't, knowing what's of the flesh, what's lust, what's pride, what's the pride of life. So I don't know. I'm just blown away this morning, and I'm gonna take this and run with it. I'm gonna go on a discerning spree right now. So I just had to share this because, wow. So just letting go of the world, that's gonna help us discern God's will. Knowing what's of the world, that's gonna help us discern God's will, His good, acceptable, perfect will. Be blessed.